Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first week's podcast where we're going to be talking about Leaving the Atocha Station by one of my favorites, Ben Lerner, with another one of my favorites, Helen Davidson. Hi, Helen.
Hello.
Helen Davidson just worked out that this is the how manyth time that you've taken?
I think it's 7 or 8. I actually couldn't quite remember.
She's taken this course 7 or 8 times, and each time we have learned something new together. Even when we study things like Leaving the Atocha Station, this is her second exposure to. I'd love to hear just a little bit from you, Helen, what that experience was like coming back to the same text a second time.
It was actually really good for me to practice that coming in with fresh eyes. I purposefully didn't do any kind of reflection of what I went through last time. I came in and I went, right, really focus on the words, really connect in the space that I'm in now. So that was actually quite useful for me to practice coming in and leaving everything else behind, so to speak.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily easy, but it was good. It was good for me to practice it.
Yeah, and as a practice, I like that word. As a practice, I think it can be incredibly useful for us as healthcare providers to remember, even if we've seen this patient, 1,000 times before, or we've seen someone like them and we think we can fit them into a personality type that we're familiar with. And, usually our guesses turn out to be right. Still, it is so helpful for us to come in with what you call that fresh set of eyes, to try to see everything new and to really just focus on the material details of what you see in front of you, which, as you say, can be incredibly hard, but so important for us who are in healthcare and in pain care. So thank you for bringing that up again. So just to get started, for those of us who have not read Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner, this is an excellent book. And though the first few pages that we're going to be talking about in this class and close reading in this class don't really touch on this yet, it is funny. It is a funny book. It's actually quite self-aware. One of this narrator's greatest attributes is his ability to reflect on his own inanity and pretension and place as a white man studying abroad. And we just get glimpses of it here in these first few pages. And what I really love about this particular group's reaction to this man is that there's a lot of generosity in the way that we're looking at him. I've worked with this text with groups in the past, and there's been a wholesale rejection of this narrator, which is understandable. In these first few pages, we have a white young man coming over from America, visiting Madrid and going to the same museum every day, visiting the same painting, Van de Weyen's Descent from the Cross. And another man is standing in his place one day and he gets very upset, right? He does not want this man to be ruining his ritual. And yet this man, as he's standing in front of the painting, has something he calls a profound experience of art. Or at least our narrator wonders if it is a truly profound experience or if the man is just performing, because the man is able to tap into something that our narrator has not been able to tap into, which is this deep emotional connection or transformation by art. And he varies, he toggles between wondering if this is true or just respecting in awe the performance of it. Maybe this man is just performing awe, and in his performance it becomes a kind of meta narrative on how should we react to this kind of overwhelming emotional outbursts in a public setting. And so he sees him as a kind of performance artist. And as the man leaves the museum, our narrator decides to follow him. That's the end of the section that we've read for today. So it's understandable that so many people have read this and seen the entitlement of of this narrator, that this painting belongs to him, or perhaps that he's unable to really truly empathize with the man who may be having a truly profound experience and projecting his own lack of profundity onto the man. So I understand a lot of people's initial rejections, but in this group, I also saw a very, very generous eye. Did you see the same thing, Helen?
Yes, yeah. There was definite like a real selection of reactions, which it fascinates me, because I cannot explain why. I just don't like. I just don't like the character. And I went really, and I looked, and I tried to find, what it was that I didn't like. And there were, even before, similar, I kind of realized I had a similar reaction. And when I read it through other people's eyes, I go, oh yeah, I can see, I can see that. And that's, but I still just couldn't shift something in me. And yet this time there was two comments that really just went as though like someone had just switched the lights on, and I was going, oh, okay, now I can see differently. Like, it was almost, previously it was like I wanted to see the same person that they were seeing, and I wanted to be, compassionate and be like the person, but it was just quite simple comments that I read in other people's close readings, and it just made me go, that's different. It was quite interesting.
Can you point to just a couple of places that, or comments that you felt changed your mind about this narrator?
From my colleagues' close reading, it was actually when Deepak commented on the no words are exchanged by any protagonist anywhere in the chapter, and it was quite a factual statement, but I just read it, and I just went, we don't hear his voice. We only hear his potentially his thoughts. And it was just this, there was this huge part of him that I went, we don't know. That's where that kind of connection. And then Susan made comments about, he seems to observe everything from afar. And it made me go, there is so much distance there, and yet she recognized the man as a doppelganger. And I was like, oh my gosh, these two are sitting here together. And it was just, these two comments shifted the whole focus on how I was reading the words, how I was seeing the scene. Here was something where you were having a connection with these people, yet there was also this distance. And then it was just this so much unknown that I went, I do not know this person at all. And that's maybe kind of just like opening up that space that makes me went, I don't know. I can't, how can I have such a strong reaction to this character that I actually do not know? And for the first time I went, I want to read the book.
This is awesome, Helen. As you're talking, the words that come to mind are narrative humility, right? And I think we've read a little bit about this concept so far. It's a concept that comes from narrative medicine, where we embrace the fact that we don't know and cannot know everything about the other who stands in front of us, even as we do our best to get to know that person, to look for the small details that tell us what they might be experiencing, even as we ask them questions that help us understand their perspectives, even as we really lean in and listen to their stories. We cannot know completely. And that narrative humility always lends itself to an ethic, or it is my hope that it lends itself to an ethic. And this is an ethic of curiosity, of compassion, of gentleness, that when this character comes into our clinic and we have these innate judgments, we have these built-in ways of looking at a person. Um, as a practice, we start practicing setting those judgments aside and seeing them with those fresh eyes, as you mentioned at the
Mm.
beginning. So I love that. I'm so glad that you want to read the book too, because it is a very, very funny read. That being said, I really liked what you were talking about with Susan's exploration of the remove and the narrator's distance. Susan says, our narrator seems to be incapable of connecting strongly with his own emotions, though he seems intensely drawn to emotion and art in other people. So there's as Lysanthia puts it in her close reading, a kind of push and pull, uh, in some sense, he's pushed away from others, and in other moments we zoom in close. Did you
Mm.
identify with any of that as you have looked at art in the past?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that whole theme of, sort of distance and closeness and connection and disconnection just seemed to be threaded throughout a lot of people's comments. Um, I think it was Anna that did this, amazing recollection of what she could hear and the sound, but also the view of the clouds and the distance, where you've got all this like closeness of what was happening in the apartment, and then we suddenly went off into the clouds, and that was, I remember the first time around, I loved that line. I should have written it down, sorry. But I think she made comments about is his view of the world clouded, or there was some reference to, is he seeing things through the clouds? And I thought, oh gosh, there's so many layers of that idea was coming through quite
Yes.
interestingly.
Let's dive in here. This is really important. And I love that you bring up Anna's close reading, because this is an example of fantastic close reading. What Anna does is she looks at a single line. And this line catches her eye, it bugs her, it makes her want to dig in deep to it. So instead of doing a high-level summary, she looks at one particular line, at each word in that line, and starts to make some interpretive guesses, some educated hypotheses about how this might relate to meaning in the text as a whole. So the line that she's pointing to is, in the distance, the palace and long lines of cloud. At first, it seems just to be a description, but as Helen is pointing out, there's something deeper going on here. In the distance, right? The first statement of remove. There's a distance clearly here. There are long lines of cloud in this narrator himself. There seems to be something murky, something unnameably obscuring, maybe even a little bit dark, going on in the psychology of this narrator, that is separated somehow from the palace, right? The palace, Anna starts to think, maybe the palace is a reprieve from this cloudiness. Maybe the palace is a point of clarity. So she starts to wonder if, like the museum, something in the distance offers a little glimpse of hope. She says, the palace, something beautiful, profound, otherworldly, rich like art or the preternaturally bright day, seems to offer a possibility, a sign, a light bulb. Maybe the student will end up enduring the long lines to reach what he is deeply longing for, a profound experience, but I feel he may not know this yet. So in a sense, this line becomes a little bit of foreshadowing. Now, as you guys are reading that, you may be thinking, like that's beautifully worded, but how did she find that much in a single sentence? That seems to be pulling a lot out of a single sentence. What she's doing is making some logical leaps based on what she knows contextually about what's going on in the text that follows. But she is grounding her observations in the material details in certain words and wondering why this author uses the words, the images, the phrases that he's using. So I encourage these leaps. Of course, in the lived experience of the clinic, we wouldn't launch into these, these close readings with people. Here's what I think what you've just said means in the larger context, without actually asking them if we're right, or asking them to clarify their meanings, letting it come from them and just listening. But doing close readings in this way sets our imagination to work. It allows us to really dig into the textual present of the text in a way we don't have the luxury of doing in the clinic. So it's a practice that we allow ourselves in the space of the slow time of these written encounters. So I encourage you to take these imaginative leaps, as long as you're grounding them in the material details, as Anna is doing here. So just bravo to Anna. Thank you for showing us an excellent close reading. I also wanted to point us to another excellent close reading where we started really wondering about the first sentence. First sentences of novels are great places to start close reading. Often they contain a lot of foreshadowing that we didn't even notice. And when we return to and read it again, we notice how profound, I can't get that word out of my vocabulary lately, those first sentences are. Our first sentence here is, the first phase of my research involved waking up weekday mornings in a barely furnished attic apartment, the first apartment I looked at after arriving in Madrid, or letting myself be woken up by the noise from La Plaza Santa Ana, failing to assimilate that noise fully in my dream, then putting on the rusty stovetop espresso machine and rolling a spliff while I waited for the coffee. Helen, what have we learned in this sentence so far?
There's this, obviously I connect in with the title as well, with the journey. So we know this is a first phase. We know that it, obviously the financial condition, or space that he's in, there's it's quite poorly furnished, and there's the rusty sort of element of the coffee pot that we're seeing. And I guess there's an element of like the first phase of my research, I automatically went into a bit of a scientific kind of idea with the sort of the research and the first phase. It kind of seemed a little bit against what came later in my thoughts. It's just that's how how I started in with that. But that's
love that.
My bias there, probably.
I love that. Beautiful, beautiful points. I like this, that you've pointed out this line, the first phase of my research, because we collectively as a group are embarking on the first phase of our research here, right? So we too are on a journey. As you point out in the title, leaving the Atocha station is a departure. We are departing together, and we're on this journey into, the preternaturally bright day that we don't quite know what to expect is out there yet. So we too are in the position of our narrator. But this narrator uses very scientific language. He is going to embark on research. And even throughout the piece, I hear that scientific language kind of come back about, the process of his research. Even though these processes are taking the little white pills and taking a shit before he leaves. I mean, he has a methodology that seems to be working for him, which makes me curious. What is his project, do you think? On a high level or a figurative level?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I should have said on a literal level.
Yeah. It's. There's the. I don't think it's the. Straight away just doing kind of like a art literature sort of side of things. It seems to be, this connected with the observation of the reaction to art. As the sort of the pages go on, we have this reaction of the man that we're witnessing, but then we're also hearing his recognition that he's not had that profound experience. And then, there's, I can't remember quite the space where he talks about, what is it, it's almost like looking at what is that reaction to art, rather than doing a study of the art itself.
Yeah.
It's,
Mhm.
yeah, I kind of do want to know now what the research is.
Yeah. And I think you already brought this up, the scientific language versus what comes later, because what comes later is really, as you're so nicely putting it, something that is more of a search for something profound, right? Like, it's not just material. It's not just the Descent from the Cross or Lorca's poems, or even his own ability to create a poem, which becomes a big problem later on in the novel. It's really a question of profundity and what that means. How do you find it? How do you access this thing that is supposed to be profound, that other people say they experience? Is it even real? Like, this is the real seeds of the project. And maybe it's the seeds of our own project too. So let's talk about the PEAs, as Catherine. So I'm never going to be able to forget the PEA. The profound experience of art, the PEA, as Catherine has dubbed it. So what is a PEA? How do we access it? Is there a secret recipe or ingredient for a PEA, or is it all just performance? And maybe that's the same thing. I know I'm opening a big can of worms here with that question, Helen, but do you have any thoughts on how?
Yeah, I absolutely loved creative writing on this, in this group, and I think, that whole tapping into it and the performance, we had such a kind of like this wonderful range of profound experiences, or what we were calling them. And I mean, I was a kind of amongst the, well, what is, have I had a profound, if I have to ask, have I had a profound experience? Maybe I haven't. But then, reading everyone else's, there was just, the opera visit, the music, the journey of self-discovery and writing, the recall of a humorous movie. And it was just this lovely idea that these profound experiences are in everyday things. And then I think that no, I did write it down somewhere, it's something that shifts, something that changes us. And I went, it doesn't need to be, it's like this, what we expect to see in a profound experience, and there's that whole judgment, and am I arty enough to have a profound experience, or is it good enough, is it, is this what it is, kind of thing, that second guessing. Whereas in fact, this people that have come together, that don't know each other, that have just shared these, their perception of profound experiences, and they all are, they all were, because they all created that shift, they all created a change, or they influenced their lives in some way. So I think the idea that profound experiences could happen in every day, pretty much.
Yeah. And I like your definition of a PEA as something that creates space for change, something that is a kind of a catalyst, a moment where change becomes possible. And at the risk of sounding cliche, it makes me think, what's the difference between a profound experience of art and a profound experience of God or of the sacred, of something that touches us on that deep level and creates a space for an opening to emerge. So as I'm reading, these, you started already listing, these great artworks that people really started communicating with and being transformed by. I noticed that is a theme, that they were changed by the artwork itself. So I started to wonder, what is the recipe for that? What is the, how do you get there? And I was really entranced by Lysanthea's post about going to MoMA. And
Mm.
she had this great line. Let's see if I can find it. Um, where she says, of course I can't find it right now. So Lysanthea, I apologize if I misquote you here, darling. That, she had to have a certain intention to get to the MoMA. She had to get there on purpose, right? It wasn't in her normal venue. It wasn't near the coffee shop. It wasn't near the bookstore. It wasn't near the cafe where you get the Vegemite toast. She had to go out of her way to get there. On purpose. And then once she got there, she was surprised by what she found. So I started thinking, like, maybe it's a combination of intention and surprise, which seem to be two very different things that work together. The intention might be unconscious. It might be so subtle you didn't even know it was there, but maybe it shows itself as a being open, as just allowing yourself to have that profound experience, just like he says in that opening sentence, letting myself be woken by the noise, failing to assimilate that noise into my dream, which to me is that that in the same way is failing to just as the Lyssanthea has to get out of the familiar, right? Failing to assimilate the familiar, you have to be open to the new and to let it wake you up, right? And to be surprised by what you find.
So then are
Yeah.
you actually creating by being in that space? So by being in that space where you can kind of, you've gone out of your normal, or you've done something a little bit different, or then there's space for something new. So that's where the space for the change comes in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be, this grand gesture, like, traveling to New York City and going to the MoMA. It could be, as you put it so nicely, Helen, something mundane, something daily, something as small as watching a little bee on the pavement, as Anna puts it. She says something great. I suppose I know this is just called paying attention. Right? That's all we're doing here. Slowing down, paying attention, being open to what can surprise us. And I hope we take the spirit of that with us into the rest of our 8 weeks together now. This text, I think, is a really great way to launch us into our own research and to make us wonder how we're going to approach it, with what spirit, with what new fresh set of eyes are we going to approach this material together. So Helen, I want to land just by asking you, what surprised you, or where is this study taking you now that you are embarking on your 8th journey?
I think there was like it's quite interesting coming in, and sort of hearing some people's comments on the, am I doing this right? Or we had some conversations of right and wrong, and it's very easy, like when we're talking about how do you feel, when we're in the clinical setting, we don't actually question how do we feel. We just appropriately connect with people and respond with people, but I think by looking at how we feel and by looking close reading together as a group, you then go, there are so many other rights, and so there's that reminder of where your own bias comes in, and how that interacts with that clinical space. And that's just such a nice kind of refresher. And I think the big thing for me was this connection and disconnection can sit so closely together, so that this week when I've been in the clinic and just talking with patients, and I am aware that we're connecting, but there's also so much space that's disconnected, that's okay, that's sitting there at the same time, and it was actually it was really nice to just sit there with that and not have to be connected everywhere, but just to go, you know, that's really nice to have the both in there, to have the silence and the noise together, and not to know everything perhaps, and not to you know, not, you don't have to hear everything at that time. It was yeah, it even just in this little week was quite nice to experience that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that, to not have to be the one who knows, because that is a mantle that many of us feel we have to put on in clinical settings. When you are the doctor, or you are the healthcare provider, or you are the administrator or the teacher or the advocate that people look to know how to do things right. And sometimes it can be a gift to really just sit in the silence and not know, and be open to that narrative humility, and just to learn how to be still and listen as well. I love that. And it really makes me wonder too, as you're talking about applications in the clinic, you know, the question of empathy really seemed to come up a lot on the discussion boards as well. You know, some of us saw our narrator as I think most of us saw our narrator as unempathetic, not able to really put himself in the man's shoes, kept projecting himself onto the man as a doppelganger, as, you know, someone who's watching himself. And then, you know, also his inability to see the man as capable of having something as profound that he himself can't tap into. But in a sense, I saw a lot of empathy coming from others on the discussion boards toward the man, that it's hard. It's really hard to empathize when you yourself don't have any real knowledge of or access to, you know, what's going on behind somebody's eyes. So how do we cultivate that practice of empathy? Maybe we should start out just by defining our terms here. You know, what do you think empathy is, or what it looks like? How does this relate to the sitting in the silence and not knowing?
Yeah, I think it's that whether it's an acknowledgement, an understanding. I don't, because it's always classified as an understanding of, you know, feelings or emotions, but whether you have to understand them, because you're always going to have your own perception of that. You're always coming in with your own, you're coming in with your eyes to look at it. So whether it's a recognition of the emotions and feelings and of another, and then there's that potentially it's you know, does it then come into the desire, not necessarily desire, but the curiosity to learn more. And I think that's the thing. Like, I mean, as you said about the reaction, it's like, well, what would you, you know, I went, well, what would I have done in a museum if someone was distressed, you know, and sobbing? And it's like, well, I probably wouldn't. I mean, I think there's some reference of it lasted 2 minutes. That's not really that long a time. And you would go, I don't want to disturb them, because you don't want to break that space that they're in. And, you know, if they, how do we know that there's distress that we need to come in and support the person? And how, you know, how do we know, well, actually, they're in there. I'm, you know, it was the whole thing of, is the act of him following actually a sign that he's showing he cares, because he is following? And is this person okay? Or is this that curiosity of what are they going to do in the next room? You know, it's quite an interesting thing to kind of pose to yourself, to go, well, what would you do in that situation in a museum? Everyone's got their headphones on and listening to their sort of the talk that's going on, and this person here is in front of you, is uncontrollably sobbing, but then stops and then moves on. It's sitting, it's like just sitting with that distress, not having to, you're not there to fix it, you're just there to, you know, here I am with you.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said, Helen. And I think the impulse to fix, right? That's
Mm.
something that is so hard to let go of, especially as healthcare providers. Many of us, I think, that the ethic in the back of our head is, oh, you should have gone up to him. You should have asked him, are you okay? Let's sit down and talk about this. Like the ethic is to like get in there, fix it, ask him, and there is a kind of, I don't know, if not respect, there is, or I'm sorry, if not humility, there is a kind of respect that our narrator has for this stranger, even as he calls him the great artist, and follows him
Mm.
with this kind of these new eyes, that he's starting to see him a little differently. And I do think that there's something very cool happening as he steps out into that preternaturally bright day at the end, as he follows him within that spirit of curiosity, which I think, if we take that notion, borrowed from the definition of narrative humility, that we can never access the lived experience of somebody's truth, not fully. Even if they tell us, we'll never know exactly what it feels like to be in their shoes. If we take that spirit of humbleness with us, then what we're left in this definition of empathy is not knowing that person, not fully recognizing what they're going through, understanding that we can't, and being curious anyway, being with anyway. And I think you're onto something when you say he is approaching that as he follows the man out into that preternaturally bright day, into the unknown of his experience. So thank you so much for rounding out our talk with that great point about curiosity, not fixing, the desire to learn more. So on that note, is there anything else you'd like to add, Helen, or any advice that you have for our group, as the veteran, the reigning veteran of the class? Do you have any advice for any newbies as we move on to our next week?
I, I think that the key things is really just, there is it's no right or wrong. That's the whole grounding in the art, or in the close reading, like grounding in the source. Really keep connecting back into that. If you are, if there is that reflection of how you feel, it's that looking in. Well, what was it that made me feel that? So that there is that sort of, as you say, the personal connection to the source, but then looking at where is that, where does it come from?
Yeah. Always grounding your observations in the details. Yeah. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you.
So Helen has given us a great example of what we're going to be doing at the end of every week, which is really just an informal chat about the text that we've read, how it's impacted you, how it's changed you, how it's made you perhaps see things a little bit differently, or reinforced your biases, whatever the case may be. So I have posted a sign-up sheet for each week that we're going to be meeting together in the course, with the themes of that text of that week listed. So if any of those themes are calling to you, please sign up for only one, and let me know what time zone you're in the world, so we can try to make that meet via Zoom. This is the first time we are going to be sharing our podcasts with the world. We're going to be posting them on our Narrative Medicine and Pain Care page, so others can see what we're up to in class. If you have any questions at all, you know where to reach me. I'm so excited for the weeks that we have together as we embark on our own research and step out into that preternaturally bright day together. Helen, stick around. For the rest of you, I will see you on the boards this week. Bye, guys.